Namaskar, good morning, a very warm welcome to all of you. I'm delighted to be here in this session. As I was telling Kishwarji, how nice that two women from different fields, both film buffs, are discussing the first lady of Indian cinema, Devika Rani Chaudhary. So I was really happy to be here. And first of all, congratulations, Kishwarji, on the National Award for this
This is the book.
It's won the National Film Award for Best Writing on Indian Cinema. And truly well deserved. I hope all of you get a chance to read the book. Of course, the title is quite tantalizing because it was touted as the longest kiss ever in Indian cinema. There are variations on how long it is, but you should read the book to find out whether it was 2 minutes or 4. But it is a remarkable story. The title refers to this scene from Karma, which was a big production of Himanshu Rai, the first one which was actually screened in London also. And it's a very exciting book. It's very expansive in its coverage. So I want to start, Kishwarji, by saying that why hasn't a book been written before this on Devika Rani? Because I was astounded when I was reading. I mean, it's such a rich story, such an amazing story. And imagine a young girl. I mean, we are talking about the early 20th century. I mean, in 1920s, how a young girl, built a career in the films, and how she collaborated and then founded a studio, again the first studio, Bombay Talkies, in Indian cinema. So what a pioneer, for this pioneering act of hers, she really deserves to be applauded. So was it tough writing this book? I would like to ask you, how tough was it to get material about her, to, do this deep dive like you have done into her life?
Thank you, Nirupama ji, and many thanks to JLF as always for inviting me and for all of you for making it to this session. Thank you very much. Devika Rani Roerich is a very enigmatic figure in Indian cinema because she was a very private person during her own lifetime. Her story has not been navigated before or explored before because her archives are now spread all over the world. It does not lie in any one space or museum or even the National Film Archives. It's very interesting that I stumbled upon her story quite by accident. I think sometimes you just find that, it's serendipity. It's this whole idea that you can get into a subject just quite by accident because something attracts you towards it. So I was working actually on the first book that I had written on Indian cinema, which was the story of Nargis and Sunil, Dutt, which came out as a book called Darlingji. So I had gone to the National Film Archives, which some of you may know is in Pune. At that time, I believe it has now been upgraded quite a lot, but at that time it was in a bit of, what should I say, a bit chaotic, if that is the best way to put it. And I literally stumbled. Literally, there were reels lying on the ground, there were VHS tapes lying here and there, and quite by accident, I discovered Himanshu Rai, that is Devika Rani's first husband. He was a director, producer, even an actor in silent cinema. So I came across his early films, or जिन्होंने उनकी पहली फिल्में नहीं देखी हैं, those of you who may not have seen his films, I would urge you to see them because these were films made in the 1920s, made with German and sometimes British technicians. He was already making Indian cinema at that time. अब तो हम बहुत खुश होते हैं कि अगर कोई कहता है कि हाँ, Indian cinema को recognition मिल रही है, नाटू नाटू को देख के we are all, dancing with joy and things like that. But these were people in the 1920s and 30s who were already making Indian cinema abroad and getting accolades for it. मतलब इस तरह के reviews जो हिमांशु राय को अपनी पहली फिल्मों के लिए मिली, that is Devika Rani's first husband, the reviews he got were astonishing. So I got intrigued, especially when I saw her. her acting was amazing. She came with the talkies. So her films, which I watched very briefly again at the National Film Archives, intrigued me. Here is this very gorgeous, beautiful woman. Now we call her the First Lady of Indian cinema, but we have forgotten her completely all these years. And there she was, luminous, matlab itni khoobsurat, itni absolutely with a fragility that you do not find in many of the actresses today, so superbly talented. So, and I could not find very much written about her. Even in the National Film Archives, which I'm talking now when I started researching this book, almost 15 years ago. फिर उसके बाद इतनी लंबी journey to find out more about her. Who was she? Where did she come from? What happened with her? It was literally like a jigsaw puzzle. And you know, if you are passionate about it, आपको तो सब पता ही है, सबने किताब पढ़ी होगी called The Secret, जिसमें ये बात बार-बार दोहराई जाती है that if you really want something badly enough, you will get it. And that is exactly what happened to me, because when I started looking for things about her, I couldn't find very much, but ultimately I found a box of letters lying, just forgotten. I went through those letters and I found her entire story written in her own hand to her second husband, Svetoslav Roerich. So that was like a gold mine, you know. So through that, I then began to go backwards and pieced together unki puri zindagi ki jo kahani thi. I started putting it together bit by bit. And not only through that, I also started going through whatever I could find anywhere in the world which was accessible to me. And I could put together all the reports on her, all the movies that I could watch of hers. So it was very often a very difficult narrative. So thanks to COVID, I would say, मैंने 2 suitcases full, there were 2 suitcases full, huge ones, of papers that I had collected over the years. And then finally, जब COVID हुआ और हम कहीं नहीं जा पा रहे थे, we couldn't go anywhere, we couldn't do anything, that's the time when I spread all these papers all over my home and I began to piece together her narrative. And finally this book got written, and I'm very grateful that it got the National Award for the Best Book on Indian Cinema. This year it was
Amazing.
given. Thank you.
What a journey of discovery.
So that was for me a recognition that hard work and struggle does pay off, because since she was an actress in the 1920s, I would say really 1933 was when Karma began to be released all over the world. So she was only known at that time. So in between, there wasn't very much information given about her, except in the 1940s when she began to head Bombay Talkies, and when she was also in the 30s an actress. So there was her private life and her personal experiences, her personal journey, which I think is very important for us today to understand how a woman managed to reach the top of her profession at that time, because she became the head of Bombay Talkies, and that for us as modern women is something we can all take pride in. So it was a very long journey for me to put together, because जिसकी भी मैं interview ले रही थी उस time, I would record interviews of people who said they knew about Devika Rani, but when I sat down to actually talk to them, I realized they didn't know very much because of the distance in years. It's been like, if you look back today, it's like a good 80 years between us and her journey. So it was only through the letters, through the, the little bits of information I came across that I really put the book together.
So I must tell you, the book is really exhaustive in its coverage, but 2 aspects of Devika Rani which I really commend, which I found in the book was, one was that she lent a certain respectability to an artist, because those days it was said that women from so-called respectable families do not go into this film world. So she was a singer, she made a mark as an actor, as a singer. The other very important contribution, as Kishwarji just said, is as the co-founder of Bombay Talkies. As a co-producer, not only did she ensure a safe working environment for women, I mean, think about it again, we are talking about early 1920s and 30s. And even today you hear of cases of harassment, especially of women. So it was really remarkable when I read the book that other women who came in to work with Bombay Talkies like Leela Chitnis or Begum Khurshid Mirza or later Hansa Wadkar, all of them felt so comfortable because it's absolutely different. All the women here would know when a woman is heading a company, it's a completely different environment. So I think that was a very important contribution of hers, and to get women into the mainstream in Indian cinema, and how she held her own in Bombay Talkies against the other men on the board. Again, a remarkable thing, Kishwarji has actually narrated board meetings, what used to go on, and how tenacious this lady was. Finally there was a split in Bombay Talkies, as we know, and Filmistan was formed. So, would we like to talk about a little bit about, her kind of, how she held her own against all these men in Bombay
Certainly.
Talkies?
Those of you who know a little bit about Indian cinema would know that the whole Me Too movement, which has come up now, and the whole patriarchy that has existed in Indian cinema is not new. In fact, in the 1930s and 40s, as Nirupanji has just mentioned, there were quite a lot of women who came from the so-called disreputable professions. Now, of course, we have a different way of looking at it, but in those days, anybody who was a singer or from the Tawayaf background, they were the ones who normally took a very easy entry into cinema because they were used to performing in front of audiences. और उनके लिए कोई शर्म की बात नहीं थी कि अगर वो इंडियन सिनेमा में एक्टिंग कर रहे हैं. But for women of respectable backgrounds, it was considered to be completely off. It was not something that you could even consider. So Himanshu was a very astute. Not only was he an astute producer, he also was very good at understanding how the market works. He was a very intelligent man. After he and Devika met in London, he decided that this was a woman with her background, with her impeccable credentials. She was a great grandniece of Rabindranath Tagore. She spoke excellent English. She was extremely graceful. Men would just routinely, ek routine ki baat thi, they would fall in love with her. Whenever they just had to look at her and they would be just absolutely bemused. She was the kind of woman who could be a very good partner to him in establishing a studio because she had all the gracefulness that he wanted and also all the good connections that he wanted. But with Devika, she was very clear that she always wanted to be a professional working woman. So he had to persuade her that it's okay, you can enter into this stream and we will together build this studio. So it became a partnership. It was actually a very equal partnership. He respected her even though there was an age difference of about almost 16 to 17 years between them. They got married and they took their training in Germany and then returned to India with the first film, which is called Karma, जिससे ये longest, जिसकी background में ये longest kiss है. Because in Karma, in those days, of course, let me just give you a quick background. It was not unheard of for actresses, even Indian actresses, to exchange a kiss on screen. अब तो बहुत scandalous हो गया था बीच में. अब तो सभी kiss कर रहे हैं, पर बीच में there was a period when nobody could kiss on the Indian screen, as it were. दो फूल मिल सकते थे, दो birds मिल सकते थे, इस तरह की चीजें वो दिखाते थे. पर kissing was banned. However, in the 1920s and 1930s, she was very much in the forefront of what she was doing. She was a very modern woman. So in the first film itself, in Karma, they did exchange this kiss, a very passionate one, which people said was 4 minute की है, पर मैंने time किया है उसको, वो शायद 2 minute की होगी. It must be about 2 minutes, not more than that. But yeah, it looked very long because this is for the first time there is this woman practically lying on top of this guy and kissing him, which was not heard of, ever before or not seen. But it was a very successful film in abroad because she got the most amazing reviews in 1933. That's why I repeat, आजकल हम सोचते हैं कि अच्छी review मिल जाए, बहुत बढ़िया है बाहर. But in those days, she got the most astonishing reviews, and she got offers from Hollywood as well as from British cinema. But they decided to come back and set up Bombay Talkies. Now, coming to the fact that she was very clear that she wanted to be a professional person, working in a professional environment, within the scenario, as we have already painted, as you know, is a very patriarchal scenario, even in the 1930s and 40s in Bombay. But Himanshu gave her a good status, saying that she was, though she was singing, she was dancing, and she was also acting. She even was writing scripts. The first script, unheard of Karma, was actually written by her, though she never got the credit for it. So the point is, in those days, she was doing all of this, but because it was a very patriarchal kind of society, and Himanshu was surrounded by men who wanted to take over, the reins of the company, they did not give Devika full credit for what she was doing. Ultimately, she decided that this was too much for her. She could not be treated like just another woman, another actress with no status. So she ran away with her leading man, which was actually a very good trick. Najamul Hassan, who was a very handsome, very good-looking co-actor, very talented also, who was acting with her in some of the Bombay Talkies films, early cinema. And having run away, I think it jolted the whole of Bombay Talkies. They realized they could not do without her. I have to say that throughout Devika's life, she is very strategic. I'm not saying this is we're not being moralistic out here. We're not saying it was a good thing or a bad thing. I'm just saying that because she jolted the whole of Bombay Talkies at that time very publicly. आजकल तो अगर actress or actor का कोई affair होता है, of course there is a scandal, etc. Even in those days, it was a scandal that she decided to run away when they were setting up Bombay Talkies. So, at the same time, what happened was Himanshu had to go and literally beg her to come back, and then she got her power back again. It was a very difficult move for her, but she did it. And later on, she fought for the when Himanshu dies. She's a very young widow. He dies when she's barely in her 30s, and she is left to battle all these men who never wanted her there in the first place, which includes actually Ashok Kumar, who, as you all know, is a very well-known actor. Most of you would have seen his films. And he also was on the other side. He too did not want Devika to take over the reins, because this is a whole patriarchal thing. They just don't want a woman to be in charge. But she fought that battle, and she again won. And this battle was fought through the shares that she had with her. And you must read the book, because it's a fascinating story, how she gets hold of the shares. And because if you had enough shares, you could actually be on the board, on the governing board of Bombay Talkies. So she did everything, sometimes in a little quirky fashion, which was when she ran away. Sometimes she did things through another way, through the board meetings and so on. But she always managed to get ahead of the men, and she managed to teach them a lesson every time whenever they tried to get rid of her from Bombay Talkies. So it's a very interesting story, because you must remember, उसके पास कोई MBA तो था नहीं, nor did she have any training, nor had she even been to college. She had only studied in school in England. So she had nobody really guiding her It was her own intelligence and her own, whatever she could use at that time, she managed to become the person who was heading Bombay Talkies and the studio in charge. And it was quite astonishing at that time to have a woman having such an important place in Indian cinema.
So thank you for mentioning the word strategic interest, which is something I want to end. I'm getting a hint that the session time is over. So Devika, as you have mentioned in your book, put up with a lot of violence, domestic violence, and I'm so glad you mentioned this in the book. But why did she put up with it? As you rightly said, it was her strategic interest, not in her own person, not just protecting her own, not just self-preservation, but protecting the baby they had nurtured together, she and Himanshu, which is Bombay Talkies, because she wanted to stay back and fight for Bombay Talkies, which is why she came back even after eloping with Najam. So in the words of Sheryl Sandberg, I think she took the hint of leaning in and compromising and putting up with a lot. But she was a fighter, and I think we should applaud it. So
She was a survivor. Yeah.
She was a survivor. So
yeah.
I think in the words of Nida Fazli, कभी किसी को मुकम्मल जहां नहीं मिलता, कहीं ज़मीं तो कहीं आसमान नहीं मिलता. But she put up with a lot, but she emerged a fighter and victorious. And I hope all of you read the book and enjoy it, and get to know a bit more about this lady, the first lady of Indian cinema, Devika Rani. Thank you.
Thank you so much.